Trump warns Jamaica, don't support Europe's net zero shipping plan. The storm on the horizon in a move shaking the global maritime world. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has issued a bold warning to nations considering support for the European-led net zero shipping framework, a plan by the International Maritime Organization, IMO, to make all ships carbon neutral by 2050. Washington calls it a global carbon tax that will harm U.S. economic interests, and it's threatening to impose heavy costs on any country that dares to back it. The stakes are high. For small island states like Jamaica, this is not just about shipping or climate, it's about survival. The Caribbean's trade, tourism, and imports all depend on global shipping routes, and any new regulation could mean higher costs and tougher competition. Yet, refusing to support the framework could make Jamaica seem anti-climate, at a time when rising sea levels and hurricanes are already battering the region. So, the question stands, will Jamaica risk Trump's wrath by siding with Europe, or play it safe and protect its ties with the United States? Let's break down what's really going on behind this high-seas showdown. Europe's net zero plan. Europe's net zero shipping framework, NZF, is the most ambitious climate initiative in maritime history. Backed by the European Union, it seeks to cut emissions from international shipping, one of the world's biggest polluters, through stricter fuel standards, carbon pricing, and penalties for ships that exceed emission limits. Supporters say the NZF is crucial to reaching global climate goals and keeping sea levels from rising further, which threatens many island nations. Under this plan, large vessels would pay if they emit more carbon than allowed, and cleaner ships could earn credits, a system similar to what exists for airlines. Europe argues that the measure will drive innovation, push shipowners toward greener technology, and reduce the carbon footprint of global trade. The IMO is set to debate and vote on this framework later this year, with global attention focused on which countries will side with the EU and which will align with the US. But while Europe sees it as a climate victory, Washington sees it as an economic weapon. Trump's administration believes the EU is using climate policy to dominate global shipping markets and raise costs for American goods. To the US, this is not a green policy, it's a power play. The US strikes back. President Trump's message could not be clearer. Countries that support the IMO's net zero framework will face consequences. The US has already threatened commercial penalties, higher port fees, visa restrictions, and even limits on ships entering American harbors. Washington's position is that the NZF amounts to a global tax on trade, one that the U.S. will never accept. In a fiery statement from the State Department, the Trump administration said it would defend American economic interests by imposing costs on nations that support the framework. Behind closed doors, U.S. diplomats have been calling governments across the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia, warning them to vote no or face repercussions. Sources say that even American shipping companies are lobbying hard to block the framework, fearing billions in extra costs. This move has put smaller countries in a difficult spot. Caribbean nations like Jamaica rely heavily on U.S. trade, tourism, and investment. Angering Washington could mean losing aid, facing new tariffs, or being locked out of the U.S. market. But staying silent or voting no could also make them look like climate laggards on the world stage, a dangerous image for a country already battling the effects of global warming. Jamaica's dilemma. So, where does Jamaica stand? Officially, Kingston has not yet announced how it will vote at the IMO meeting. But based on recent statements, Jamaica seems to favor a balanced approach, one that supports reducing shipping emissions, but not at the expense of developing economies. The Maritime Authority of Jamaica recently said that while it welcomes progress on greenhouse gas reduction, it insists on a just and equitable transition for small island states like itself. Jamaica's position makes sense. As a nation dependent on imports and maritime trade, any new cost on shipping could raise prices for food, fuel, and consumer goods. At the same time, Jamaica is deeply vulnerable to climate change and rising seas, so opposing an environmental initiative outright would also look contradictory. For the government, this is a diplomatic tightrope. In other words, Jamaica is caught between two storms, the U.S. economic pressure from one side and the moral weight of climate responsibility on the other. The country may ultimately choose to abstain or support the framework conditionally, depending on whether there are safeguards for developing nations. Either way, the decision will have major political and economic consequences. the Caribbean in the crossfire. This isn't just Jamaica's fight, it's the entire Caribbean's. Trump's warning targets all island states considering support for Europe's plan, putting the region in the middle of a brewing US-EU power struggle. Some European nations have promised aid and green technology funding if Caribbean states vote in favor, while the US is dangling trade incentives and threatening sanctions if they do. For Caribbean governments, the calculus is complex. Supporting Europe could bring long-term climate benefits and new investment in green shipping, but angering the US could trigger immediate economic pain. For ports like Kingston, Bridgetown, and Nassau, vital transit hubs for global trade, any restriction from US ports would be devastating. In a region that depends on both tourism and imports, this confrontation could redefine alliances. Are Caribbean nations ready to side with Europe for the climate cause, or will they stay loyal to the US to protect their economic lifelines? Either way, the outcome could shape the region's trade and diplomacy for decades. What happens next? The IMO is expected to vote on the net zero shipping framework within weeks, and global attention will be on how developing nations vote. The US has made clear it will punish those who side with Europe, while the EU is urging island nations to take a moral stand. Behind the scenes, intense diplomatic lobbying is underway, and Jamaica's vote could become symbolic of where the Caribbean stands in this new geopolitical divide. If Jamaica votes with Europe, it will send a message that climate survival comes before politics, but it risks US retaliation. If it sides with Trump, it may protect short-term trade, but lose global credibility in the climate movement. Either path comes with consequences that could echo across shipping, tourism, and foreign policy. For now, all eyes are on Kingston. The world wants to see whether Jamaica will stand firm for climate justice or yield to Trump's economic power play. One thing is certain, the battle for the future of the seas has just begun. This story isn't just about ships and sanctions, it's about power, survival, and the future of small nations caught in big geopolitical storms. As the world debates the price of going green, the Caribbean stands on the front line of both climate change and global politics. So, what do you think? Should Jamaica risk sanctions and side with Europe, or play it safe with the US? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into Caribbean geopolitics and world affairs.